Hospital director leaves his disabled daughter with pregnant nurse and freezes in shock. Dr. Michael Davis could barely breathe as he held his 3-year-old daughter's hand before entrusting her to the nurse's care. Little Emily hadn't walked since the terrible accident 8 months ago, and he urgently needed to perform an emergency surgery that couldn't be delayed. "Doctor, don't worry. I'll take good care of Emily," the nurse said with a warm smile that always reassured him. Michael looked at the woman, about 6 months pregnant, her brown hair tied in a bun, and green eyes that radiated an inexplicable calm. Sarah had only worked at the hospital for a few months, but had already earned everyone's trust with her dedication and special affection for children. "Daddy will be back soon, sweetheart," he murmured, kissing his daughter's forehead as she stared at him with those big, sad blue eyes. The surgery lasted over 4 hours. A traffic accident had left a young man in critical condition, and every minute counted. Michael poured all his 15 years of experience as a neurosurgeon into saving that life. When it was finally over, he was exhausted but relieved. The patient would survive. Walking down the hall toward the room where he'd left Emily, he felt the weight of the responsibility he'd carried alone since Jennifer passed away. Being a single father and director of one of Denver's top hospitals wasn't easy, especially when his daughter needed such special care. As he approached the door, he heard a familiar voice singing softly. It was a song he knew well, one he used to sing to Emily every night to help her sleep. But how did Sarah know that song? It was a melody Jennifer had made up just for their daughter, something she'd never shared with anyone else. He opened the door slowly, and what he saw left him completely frozen. Emily was standing. Not just standing, walking. Her tiny bare feet moved carefully but determinedly toward Sarah, who sat in an armchair, singing softly while stroking her own belly. "Mommy! Mommy!" the little girl exclaimed joyfully, reaching her arms out to the nurse. Michael's world collapsed in that instant. His legs trembled, and he had to lean against the doorframe to keep from falling. How was this possible? The best specialists in the country had confirmed Emily might never walk again due to her spinal cord injury. And why was she calling Sarah Mommy? Sarah quickly stood when she saw him, her expression a mix of surprise and something that looked like guilt. "Dr. Davis, I can explain," she said, scooping Emily into her arms with a motion so natural it seemed she'd done it 1,000 times before. How is she walking?" Michael asked, still in shock. "I've been working with some playful physical therapy techniques. Nothing too complex, just games to help stimulate her muscles. She started standing on her own about an hour ago," Sarah explained, but there was something in her voice that didn't sound entirely truthful. Michael watched carefully. Emily was completely relaxed in Sarah's arms, playing with the nurse's necklace, a small heart-shaped pendant that glimmered under the hospital lights. The girl looked happier than he'd seen her in months. "And why did she call you Mommy?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sarah lowered her eyes for a moment before answering. "Sometimes children do that when they feel safe with someone. It's normal after trauma. She might be transferring her feelings for her mother." The explanation made sense from a psychological standpoint, but something deep in Michael's heart unsettled him. There was a familiarity between Emily and Sarah that went beyond the professional, the way the little girl nestled into her arms, as if she already knew every curve of that embrace. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. In the days that followed, Michael couldn't get that scene out of his head. Emily had gone back to using her wheelchair, but now she constantly asked to be with Sarah. Whenever the nurse was around, the little girl became more animated, more talkative. "Daddy, when is Aunt Sarah coming to play with me again?" Emily asked every day. Michael decided to investigate discreetly. He began observing Sarah at work, noticing small details that had previously gone unnoticed. She knew the hospital corridors as if she'd worked there for years, not months. She knew exactly where to find specific supplies without having to ask, and there were moments when she seemed lost in thought, with a distant, melancholy expression. One afternoon, while reviewing some records, Michael noticed that Sarah had been transferred from another hospital in a small Coloradan town exactly 6 months ago. Coincidentally, that was when Emily had begun showing the first subtle signs of improvement in her condition. He decided to speak with Dr. Robert Wilson, the hospital's child psychologist who had been monitoring Emily. "Michael, I've been observing your daughter during our sessions, and something stands out to me," Robert said during a break between appointments. "She talks a lot about Nurse Sarah. She describes their games and conversations in such detail that it suggests a very deep connection." "What kind of details?" Michael asked, a knot forming in his stomach. "She says Sarah knows the song her mother used to sing, that she knows exactly how she likes her hair brushed, that she knows her favorite color. These are specifics you've never shared with us, right?" Michael nodded, feeling that something very strange was happening. "There's another concerning detail," Robert continued. "Emily has started calling Sarah Mommy, not just when she's anxious or needy, but consistently, as if she genuinely believes Sarah is her mother." That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay awake, watching Emily as she slept peacefully in her little bed, clutching the stuffed bear Jennifer had given her on her first birthday. How could a nurse they'd known for such a short time have access to such intimate details about his daughter? The next day, he decided to approach Sarah directly. He found her during her lunch break, sitting alone in the hospital garden, gently rubbing her growing belly. "Sarah, can I talk to you?" he asked, sitting beside her on the wooden bench. "Of course, doctor." "Is this about Emily?" she replied, and Michael noticed her eyes brighten at the mention of his daughter's name. "Actually, it's about you," he said calmly. "I'd like to know more about your previous work. Emily has grown very attached to you, and as a father, it's only natural I'd want to know more about who's caring for her." Sarah hesitated for a moment, fiddling with the ends of her hair. A nervous gesture, Michael noted. "I worked at a hospital in Boulder for a few years, in the pediatric wing. I've always had a way with special needs children," she answered, but her voice sounded rehearsed, as if she'd memorized the response. "And why did you decide to move to Denver?" Michael pressed. "Better opportunities, higher pay. You know how hard it is for a single mother," she said, resting a hand on her belly. It was the first time Michael had heard about Sarah being a single mother. Somehow, he had assumed she was married, or at least had a partner. Why had she never mentioned this before? "And the child's father?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Sarah visibly tensed, standing up from the bench. "It's complicated, doctor. I'd rather not talk about it," she said, quickly excusing herself to return to work. Michael was left alone in the garden with more questions than answers. There was something about Sarah's reaction that didn't add up. And why did she always look away when talking about her past? That afternoon, an idea struck him. He decided to check Sarah's transfer records in the human resources files. As the director, he had access to that information. What he found left him even more unsettled. According to the documents, Sarah Johnson Miller had worked at Boulder Memorial Hospital for only 2 years, not a few years, as she had claimed. Before that, there was no record of her working in healthcare at all. It was as if her professional career had started out of nowhere 3 years ago. Even stranger, there were no letters of recommendation or detailed evaluations from her previous job, just a basic note confirming she had worked there and that her transfer had been for personal reasons. Michael felt a chill down his spine. Why would a talented nurse like Sarah have such limited professional records? And why would she lie about her years of experience? He decided to call Boulder Memorial Hospital the next day, pretending to be a reference checker for a promotion process. The conversation was both enlightening and disturbing. "Sarah Johnson," said the HR representative. "Yes, she worked here, but it was a very unusual situation. She showed up one day looking for a job, unable to provide any previous references. Said she had lost all her documents in a house fire." "And you hired her anyway?" Michael asked, keeping his tone professional. "She demonstrated impressive practical knowledge. It was like she knew exactly what to do, even though she couldn't explain where she had learned it. The supervisor at the time said she'd never seen anything like it." "And when did she leave?" "It was very sudden. One day she just said she needed to move to Denver and never came back. She left a hotel address as a reference for sending documents. Michael hung up with a racing heart. A hotel? Why would someone give a hotel address instead of a permanent residence? That weekend, Emily had one of her best weeks since the accident. Michael took her to the park, and for the first time in months, she asked to get out of her wheelchair and try walking a little with her walker. She managed a few hesitant but determined steps. "Dad," Aunt Sarah said, "if I try really hard, I'll be able to run like other kids soon," Emily said excitedly. "When did she tell you that, sweetheart?" Michael asked, slowly pushing the wheelchair along the park path. "Yesterday, when you were operating on the man who got hurt. She said she knows a girl who couldn't walk and now runs faster than anyone." Michael stopped pushing the wheelchair. He hadn't operated on anyone the day before. In fact, he had spent the whole day in administrative meetings. When had Emily spoken to Sarah? "Are you sure it was yesterday, honey?" he asked carefully. "Yes." She was crying a little, and I asked why. She said she missed someone very special. Emily replied with the honesty of a child. Michael's stomach tightened. Why had Sarah been crying? And why had she lied to Emily about him performing surgery? On Monday, he arrived early at the hospital and went straight to look for Sarah. He found her in the nurse's break room, sitting alone with a cup of tea in her hands, staring out the window with a distant expression. "Good morning, Sarah," he said, sitting across from her. "Good morning, doctor," she replied, but didn't meet his eyes. "Emily told me you two talked on Friday. I wasn't performing any surgeries that day," he said directly. Sarah visibly tensed, spilling a bit of her tea on the table. "I'm sorry, doctor. Sometimes I get mixed up with the schedule. Emily was asking about you and I just said the first thing that came to mind," she explained, though her hands trembled slightly. "Sarah, is there something you're not telling me?" asked Michael, watching her every reaction. She looked him in the eyes for the first time during their conversation, and what he saw left him completely unsettled. For a split second, there was a familiarity in her gaze, as if she knew him far more deeply than she should. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, standing up to leave. "Sarah, wait," he called, but she had already left the room. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, continuing. That afternoon, Michael decided to do something he'd never done before: discreetly follow Sarah when she left work. He wanted to understand more about where and how she lived, hoping to find answers to the questions haunting him. Sarah left the hospital at 6 in the evening and walked to the bus stop. Michael followed her by car, keeping his distance. She got off in a working-class neighborhood in the northern part of the city and walked a few blocks before stopping in front of a small boarding house. Michael parked and watched from afar. Sarah climbed a few steps and entered the simple two-story building. It didn't quite look like a hotel, but it wasn't a permanent residence either. It was the kind of place where people stayed temporarily, in transition. Why would a nurse with a stable job be living in a boarding house? The next day, Michael arrived at the hospital earlier and went straight to speak with Mrs. Margaret, the most senior nursing supervisor at the institution. If anyone knew about anything unusual happening, it would be her. "Margaret, can I speak with you privately?" he asked. "Of course, doctor, have a seat," she said, gesturing to the chair in front of her paper-covered desk. "It's about Nurse Sarah. I've noticed some odd behavior and wanted your professional opinion." Margaret sighed deeply, as if she'd been expecting this conversation. "Doctor, to be honest, I've noticed a few things myself," she said quietly. "Sarah is an excellent professional, don't get me wrong, but there are moments when she seems lost." "How so?" "Last week she asked me where the pediatric wing was, even though she's worked there for months. Another day I found her crying in the bathroom, and when I asked what happened, she said she couldn't explain it, that she just felt overwhelmingly sad for no reason." Michael absorbed this with growing concern. "And there's one more thing," Margaret continued hesitantly. "Sometimes she calls the children by the wrong names. Last week she called little Jake Sweetheart and the girl Lily Princess, as if they were nicknames she used for other children. Is that common?" Not the way she does it. It's like she's confusing them with other people. And there's something else that bothers me. She knows things about the patients that aren't in their records. Michael's heart began to beat faster. What kind of things? Food preferences, specific fears, personal habits, information that only family members know. When I ask how she found out, she always says she intuited it or that the child told her. But sometimes the children are too young to explain these things. Michael left the conversation even more confused and worried. All the pieces seemed to point to something very strange, but he couldn't imagine what. That night, while helping Emily take a bath, his daughter made a comment that chilled him to the bone. "Dad, why does Aunt Sarah talk in her sleep?" Emily asked innocently as she played with her rubber ducks. "What do you mean, sweetheart? When did you hear her talking in her sleep?" "Last Friday, when she stayed with me a little in the break room. She sat in the armchair and closed her eyes, then started whispering." "And what did she say?" "She called your name, Dad. She said Michael really softly, and then she said my name too. It was like she was dreaming about us." Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. Why would Sarah dream about them? And why hadn't Emily mentioned this before? "Anything else, Princess?" "She said a weird word too. Something like Jen. Jen." Emily scrunched her face, trying to remember. Michael's blood ran cold. Jennifer. Was Sarah saying Jennifer in her sleep? "Are you sure, Emily?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes, Dad. And when she woke up, she was crying. I asked if she was okay, and she said she'd had a really confusing dream. That night, Michael didn't sleep a wink. Emily's words echoed in his mind. How could Sarah dream about Jennifer if she'd never met her? Jennifer had passed away before Sarah even started working at the hospital. Unless... An absurd possibility began forming in his mind, one so impossible that he pushed it away immediately. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. The next day, Michael decided to do something desperate. He searched the hospital archives for information about the accident that had taken Jennifer from his life 8 months earlier. It was painful revisiting those details, but he needed to understand if there was something he didn't know. He found the emergency records from that terrible night. Jennifer had been admitted at 10:15 p.m., the victim of a severe highway accident. There was another record around the same time. An unidentified woman, also an accident victim, had been brought in 15 minutes later. Michael had never paid attention to that second record. At the time, he'd been entirely focused on Jennifer and Emily, who had also been injured in the crash. But now, reading more carefully, he discovered something disturbing. The second woman had survived, but was in a coma with severe head injuries. More importantly, she had stayed in the hospital for 3 months in a state of total amnesia before being discharged. There was no identification, no family had come looking for her. What had happened to her after she left? Michael checked the date. Exactly 5 months before Sarah started working at the hospital. His hands trembled as he held the papers. Could it be possible? Could there be a connection between the unidentified woman and Sarah? He decided to dig deeper. He sought out Dr. Richard Thompson, the doctor who had treated the unidentified woman. "Richard, I need to talk to you about an old case," Michael said, catching his colleague in the parking lot. "Sure. Which one?" "The unidentified woman you treated 8 months ago. The one in the coma." Dr. Richard stopped walking and looked at him curiously. "Why the sudden interest in that case?" he asked. "It's complicated. Can you tell me what you remember?" Richard sighed, recalling those difficult days. "It was one of the strangest cases of my career. The woman had suffered severe head trauma, but when she woke from the coma, she couldn't remember anything at all. Not even her own name." "What did she look like?" "Brunette, brown hair, around 30 years old. Very pretty, actually. She had a small scar on her chin and a birthmark on her left shoulder." Michael's heart raced. Sarah had a small scar on her chin that he'd always noticed, and the birthmark on her shoulder. He could check that. What happened when she was discharged? That's the saddest part of the story. She had nowhere to go. She didn't know who she was, had no known family, no identification. Social services found her temporary housing at a boarding house, and she said she'd try to rebuild her life from scratch. Michael felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. "Do you know what name she chose for herself?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Let me think. Oh yes, she chose Sarah. Said it was the first name that came to mind when they asked what she wanted to be called." The world spun around Michael. It was impossible, yet every piece fit perfectly. The lack of prior work history, the inexplicable knowledge about Emily, the familiarity between them, the dreams mentioning their names. "Richard, do you have photos of this patient in the medical records?" he asked desperately. "We should have some injury documentation photos. Why? Michael, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." If only he knew how close to the truth that was. They went together to the medical archives, and Dr. Richard located the patient's file. Michael held the folder with shaking hands and opened it slowly. The first photo showed an unconscious woman in a hospital bed, bandages on her head, her face swollen from the injuries. It was hard to recognize, but there was something familiar. The second photo was clearer, taken weeks later when the swelling had gone down. Michael looked at the image, and his world completely collapsed. It was Jennifer. Or rather, it was Jennifer's face, but with an empty, lost expression, as if she were staring at the world without recognizing anything. Michael braced himself against the wall to keep from falling. Tears streamed down his face uncontrollably. "Michael, what's going on?" Dr. Richard asked, alarmed. "This woman," he managed between sobs, "this woman is my wife." Dr. Richard stared at him in total shock. "What do you mean? Your wife died in the accident, Michael. I was there when—" "No," Michael shouted, cutting him off. "She didn't die. She's alive. She's been working at this hospital for months and I didn't recognize her." The revelation hit Dr. Richard like a punch to the gut. "But that's impossible. The records clearly show your wife was declared—" "The records are wrong," Michael was nearly shouting now. "This woman is Jennifer. That's why Emily recognizes her, why she knows things about our daughter no one else would." Dr. Richard quickly checked the files from the accident 8 months prior. His face paled as he compared the dates and details. "My God, Michael, I think there may have been a terrible mix-up in the records. That night, we had 2 critical cases almost simultaneously. It's possible that—" "The bodies were switched," Michael finished. "It's rare, but it's happened in chaotic situations. If the 2 women had similar features and arrived around the same time—" Michael had to sit down. His mind raced, processing the magnitude of what he'd discovered. Jennifer was alive. His wife, the love of his life, was alive, but with no memory of who she was or her family. And worse, she was pregnant with another man's child. Or was she? A new, even more shocking possibility began forming in his mind. Michael did some quick calculations. The accident had happened 8 months ago. Sarah was about 6 months pregnant. If Jennifer had gotten pregnant shortly before the accident— "Richard, I need to talk to Sarah immediately," he said, standing up with determination. "Michael, wait. You need to think carefully about how to approach this. If it really is her, revealing the truth abruptly could cause severe psychological shock. But she has the right to know who she is, and Emily has the right to have her mother back. Of course she does, but it must be done carefully. Trauma like what she suffered can have serious consequences if not handled properly." Michael knew Dr. Richard was right, but every fiber of his being screamed for him to run to Sarah and embrace her, to tell her who she truly was. Instead, he decided to observe her more carefully first. He spent the rest of the day discreetly watching Sarah at work. Now that he knew the truth, he saw Jennifer in every gesture, in every expression. The way she tilted her head when concentrating, the particular way she bit her lower lip when nervous, the shy smile that appeared at the corner of her mouth before spreading fully. How had he not noticed before? Maybe because he hadn't been looking. Maybe because the pain of loss had created a barrier in his mind, preventing him from seeing what was right in front of him. That afternoon, Emily was once again under Sarah's care while he attended a meeting. When he returned, he found the two sitting on the living room floor, playing with building blocks. The scene was so natural, so familiar, that his chest tightened with emotion. "Look, Dad, Aunt Sarah taught me how to make a house just like our old one," Emily exclaimed excitedly. Michael looked at the block construction and froze. It was a perfect replica of the house they had lived in before the accident. How could Sarah know the architectural details of their former home? "Sarah, where did you learn to make this house?" Indy asked, trying to sound casual. Sarah looked at the construction with a confused expression. "I don't know. The image just came to my head, and my hands built it on their own," she replied, seeming genuinely puzzled. It was muscle memory. Even without conscious recollection, Jennifer's body retained the memories of a lifetime. That night, Michael made a decision. He needed absolute certainty before acting. He obtained a strand of Sarah's hair that had gotten caught in an office drawer and requested an urgent DNA test, comparing it to samples he had of Jennifer at home. The next 3 days were the longest of his life. He watched Sarah constantly, searching for more signs, more confirmations of what he already knew in his heart, and they appeared in abundance. Sarah unconsciously hummed the song Jennifer always sang in the shower. She organized work materials exactly the way Jennifer arranged books at home. She had the same nervous habit of running her hand through her hair when focused. Most importantly, the bond between her and Emily grew stronger each day. The girl began walking again more frequently, always when Sarah was nearby, as if her mother's presence gave her strength and security. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On the 3rd day, the DNA results arrived. Michael opened the envelope with trembling hands, though he already knew what he would find. Match 99.9%. Sarah Johnson Miller was, without a shadow of a doubt, Jennifer Davis, his wife whom he had mourned and buried 8 months ago. Now he needed to decide how to tell her the truth. He decided to start gradually. That afternoon, he approached Sarah when she was alone in the break room. "Sarah, can I show you some photos?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Of course, doctor. Are they medical photos?" "No, they're personal photos of my family," he said, pulling his phone from his pocket. He first showed a recent picture of Emily playing in the park. Sarah smiled warmly. "She's so beautiful. She seems to be recovering well," she commented. "Now I want to show you an older photo," Michael said carefully. It was a photo of Jennifer with Emily on the girl's first birthday. Michael watched Sarah's reaction closely. She grew very quiet, staring intently at the image. Her hands began to tremble slightly. "Who is this woman?" she asked softly. "She's Emily's mother." "My wife," Michael replied. Sarah kept looking at the photo with a strange expression, as if trying to recall something distant. "She looks like me," she finally said hesitantly. "Do you think so?" "It's strange. Looking at this photo, I feel like I've been in that place before. I've worn that dress. I've held Emily exactly like that." Michael's heart raced. What kind of feeling? "Like a very strong déjà vu. Like it's my memory. But that's impossible because I never met your wife." Sarah rubbed her forehead, looking confused. "Sarah, are you sure you never met her?" "I am. I think I am. My memory from before the accident is very fuzzy," she admitted for the first time. "What accident?" Michael asked, pretending not to know. Sarah looked at him in surprise. "You didn't know? I was in a car accident about 2 years ago. I hit my head hard and lost many old memories. That's why my professional background is so limited." 2 years? Michael realized Sarah was confused about the timing. For her, the accident had happened 2 years ago, not 8 months. Her sense of time was distorted by amnesia. "That must have been very hard," he said with genuine compassion. "It was. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with dream fragments that feel like memories, but I can never piece them together in a way that makes sense," she confessed, tears in her eyes. "What kind of fragments?" "Images of a house with a garden full of white roses, a man's voice singing in the shower, a little child calling mommy and running toward me." She stopped, looking at Michael with sudden understanding. "Just like Emily did with me on the first day I cared for her." "And you recognized that feeling?" "Yes, it was exactly like in my dreams. That's why I couldn't explain how she started walking. It was pure instinct, like I'd done it thousands of times before." Michael decided to take the next step. Sarah, I'm going to show you one more photo. I want you to look very carefully and tell me what you feel. It was a photo of their old backyard, clearly showing the white rose garden Jennifer had planted. Sarah looked at the image, and her hands began to tremble violently. She stood abruptly, knocking over the chair. "Where did you get this photo?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and awakening. "It's the backyard of my house, our old house," Michael said calmly. "That's impossible. I dream about this garden almost every night," Sarah said, clearly agitated now. "I dream that I'm planting those roses, that I'm watering them early in the morning while a child plays nearby." "Sarah, sit down, please," Michael asked gently. She obeyed, but her gaze was distant, as if struggling with memories fighting to surface. "I know this will sound impossible," Michael began, "but I believe you're not who you think you are." "What do you mean?" "I believe you are Jennifer Davis, my wife, Emily's mother." Sarah looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "This is insane. Your wife passed away. You told me that yourself on my first day of work." "I was wrong. There was a terrible mix-up at the hospital the night of the accident. 2 bodies were switched. The woman who was buried wasn't Jennifer, it was you." "No, no." Sarah shook her head vigorously. "I remember who I am. My name is Sarah Johnson. I was born in Boulder. My parents died when I was young." "Those are fabricated memories, Sarah. Your brain created a new identity to fill the void left by amnesia." Sarah stood up again, this time walking toward the door. "This is madness, doctor. I think I'd better find another job," she said, clearly shaken. "Sarah, wait." Michael followed her. "Just let me prove it. Take a DNA test. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and never bring it up again." She stopped at the door, her back to him. "And if you're right?" she asked softly. "If I'm right, you get your life back. Your family. Your daughter." Sarah turned slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I want to believe you, but I'm scared," she admitted. "What if these memories I have of a past life are just products of my imagination? What if I want a family so badly that I'm convincing myself I'm this person? Then we'll figure it out together, but you need to know this. Ever since you started working here, Emily has been improving. Not just physically, but emotionally. It's like a part of her that was asleep has woken up." "And you?" Sarah asked hesitantly. "What do you feel when you see me?" Michael took a deep breath before answering. "From the very first day, something in me recognized you. Not consciously, but my heart knew. That's why I always felt so comfortable leaving Emily in your care. It was like my soul knew I was giving my daughter back to her own mother." Sarah covered her face with her hands and cried silently for several minutes. When she finally composed herself, she looked at Michael with determination. "All right, I'll take the test, but if the result is positive, I want you to help me recover my memories gradually. I can't just wake up one day and be a completely different person." "Of course, we'll do everything at your pace," Michael promised. The test was collected that same day, but the results would take 48 hours. During that time, Michael decided to prepare for the possible revelation. He spoke at length with Dr. Robert Wilson about the situation. "It's an extraordinary case, Michael," the psychologist said. "If it's really true, we'll have to deal with reintegrating a fragmented identity. It's a delicate process that could take months or even years." "The important thing is that she's alive," Michael replied. "Everything else we can handle together." "What about Emily? How do you explain to a 3-year-old that Aunt Sarah is actually her mother? Emily already knows in her heart. She never stopped calling Sarah Mommy. It's like children have a connection that goes beyond conscious memory." Over those 2 days, Michael watched Sarah even more closely. She seemed different after their conversation, more introspective, as if she were trying to awaken dormant memories. On the second day, she approached him during lunch. "Doctor, I had a very vivid dream last night," she said, sitting across from him. "Do you want to tell me about it?" "I dreamed I was in a yellow kitchen making a chocolate cake. A little girl was sitting on the counter licking the bowl. There was a man singing in the shower in the background." She paused, staring intently at Michael. "The man in the dream had your voice." Michael felt a lump in his throat. The yellow kitchen looked exactly like this in her old home, and Jennifer always made chocolate cake on weekends. "How did you feel in the dream?" he asked. "Complete, happy, as if that was my place in the world," she answered with tears in her eyes. "When I woke up, I felt a terrible longing for something I couldn't identify." "Sarah?" "Last night, I also started remembering things about the pregnancy," she continued, placing a hand on her belly. "Not how it happened, but I have this feeling that this baby was very much wanted. Very planned." Michael's heart raced. He and Jennifer had been trying for a second child for months before the accident. Could she have discovered the pregnancy just before the tragedy and not had time to tell him? "Do you remember telling anyone about the pregnancy?" he asked carefully. "No, but I feel like I wanted to give someone a special surprise, like it was the perfect gift." She paused, looking at him with a strange expression. "Why do I feel like I should tell you first about every little movement the baby makes? Why do I feel like you should be going through this pregnancy with me?" Michael had to restrain himself from hugging her right then and there. Every word Sarah spoke confirmed his conviction that she was truly Jennifer. At the end of the second day, the test results arrived. Michael received them first and confirmed what he already knew: a perfect match. Sarah was definitely Jennifer. Now he needed to tell her as carefully as possible. He asked to meet in the hospital garden after his shift, choosing a quiet spot away from the bustle of the halls. "Sarah, the results are in," he said, sitting beside her on the bench where they had talked so many times. "And?" she asked, though her expression already suggested she knew the answer. "You are Jennifer Davis, my wife, Emily's mother," he said gently, handing her the paper with the results. Sarah stared at the document for a long moment, absorbing the information that would change her life completely. "So everything I dream, everything I feel, are real memories," she finally said. "Yes. Your heart always knew who you were, even when your mind couldn't remember." "And Emily?" "Emily is our daughter, our first baby. And this one you're carrying," he pointed to her belly, "is our second child." Sarah began to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally understanding the emptiness she had felt inside. "I knew something was missing in my life," she said between sobs. "I always had this feeling that I'd lost something very important, but I couldn't figure out what." "It was us. It was your family," Michael said, gently holding her hand. Can I hug you?" she asked hesitantly. In response, Michael wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time in 8 months, he felt like he was truly home. Sarah nestled against his chest, just as she always had, and for a moment, it was as if the accident had never happened. "How are we going to tell Emily?" she asked after a few minutes. "Carefully, but I think she'll understand better than we imagine. Children have an instinctive wisdom about these things." They decided to tell Emily the next day. They prepared everything carefully, with Dr. Robert present to help with the process. Emily was playing in the living room when Michael and Sarah walked in together. "Sweetheart, Aunt Sarah and I need to talk to you about something very important," Michael said, sitting on the floor beside his daughter. "Is it about Aunt Sarah's baby?" Emily asked with childlike curiosity. "That too," Sarah replied, sitting on the other side. "Emily, do you remember how you always call me Mommy?" "Yes, but you always say you're not my mommy," replied the little girl with a sad face. "It's because I was confused. I hit my head really hard and forgot who I was," Sarah explained in simple words. "But now I remember. I am your mommy, my love." Emily looked from one to the other, processing the information with the seriousness only small children can muster. "So you won't leave again?" she finally asked. "Never again, princess. Never again," Sarah promised, opening her arms. Emily ran into her mother's embrace and they hugged as if they had never been apart. Michael watched the scene with his heart overflowing with gratitude and love. "And the baby in your tummy, is it my little brother or sister?" Emily asked, placing her tiny hand on Sarah's belly. "Yes, my love, it's your little brother or sister," Sarah confirmed, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "I knew it," Emily exclaimed joyfully. "I always knew you were my real mommy." In the months that followed, the Davis family's life gradually rebuilt itself. Sarah began intensive treatment with Dr. Robert to recover her memories, and little by little, fragments of her past life returned. She remembered how she met Michael in medical school, where she was studying nursing. She recalled their first date, their first kiss, the marriage proposal in the rose garden she had planted herself. She remembered Emily's birth, her first steps, the sleepless nights caring for her when she was sick. Each returning memory made her feel more whole, more connected to who she truly was. The most emotional moment was when she remembered her current pregnancy. She had been rushing to tell Michael the good news when the accident happened. It was supposed to be an anniversary surprise. "I was going to tell you during dinner," she said one night as they lay in bed in the room they now shared again. "I had bought a pregnancy test and wrapped it as a gift." "And where is that gift?" Michael asked, stroking her hair. "It must still be in our old house, stored in the bedroom closet." The following weekend, they went together to retrieve the gift. The house had been closed since the accident, and everything was exactly as Jennifer had left it. In the closet, they found a small box wrapped in gold paper. Inside was the positive pregnancy test and a note. "Michael, our love has created another miracle. Emily is going to be a big sister. I love you forever, Jennifer." Michael cried as he read the note, imagining how different things might have been if she had been able to give him the news before the accident. Their son was born 4 months later, a healthy boy they named Nathan. Emily was radiant in her role as a big sister and never tired of helping care for the baby. Sarah's recovery was nearly complete. She returned to work at the hospital, now in the maternity ward, where her personal experience with amnesia made her an even more compassionate and efficient professional. Dr. Richard Thompson, who had cared for her during her amnesia, was fascinated by her case and documented the entire experience for publication in a medical journal. The study on the heart's ability to recognize love, even when the mind forgets, became a reference in the field. The hospital created a special protocol for identifying patients in cases of multiple accidents, ensuring a mix-up like that would never happen again. Emily fully recovered from her mobility issues. The doctors explained that much of her condition had been linked to the emotional trauma of losing her mother. With Sarah back, the girl flourished in remarkable ways. The family moved to a new house, but Sarah made sure to plant a garden of white roses identical to the one at their old home. It was important for her to maintain this tangible connection with the memories she had recovered. 2 years after their reunion, Michael and Sarah renewed their wedding vows in an intimate ceremony in their backyard. Emily was the maid of honor, and Nathan, though still little, participated in the ceremony in the arms of the best man. "I promise to love you in every life, even when I don't remember who you are," Sarah said during the vows, bringing everyone to tears. "And I promise to always find you no matter where or when you're lost," Michael replied. At the reception, Dr. Robert gave an emotional toast. "Today, we celebrate not only the love between Michael and Jennifer, but also the scientific proof that some bonds are unbreakable. True love transcends memory, transcends logic, even transcends identity itself." The Davis family's story became legendary at the hospital. New employees always asked about the director, who reunited with his wife without realizing she was right in front of him, and about the nurse who saved a family without knowing she was saving her own. Sarah kept her professional name Sarah Johnson for bureaucratic reasons, but at home with her family, she fully became Jennifer again. It was as if she could have the best of both worlds, the wisdom and strength she had developed as Sarah, combined with the love and memories of Jennifer. Emily grew up knowing there were 2 moments in her life, before and after her mother woke up. She often told her school friends that her mother had been asleep for a while, but that their family's love had brought her back. Nathan grew up hearing the story of how his parents reunited in the hospital where he was born. To him, it was the most beautiful love story in the world, better than any fairy tale. Michael never again doubted the power of feelings over reason. He learned that the heart has its own intelligence, capable of recognizing what's true, even when the mind can't process it. Sarah developed an extraordinary memory after her recovery, as if her brain was making up for lost time. She remembered every detail of her past life, and also stored with absolute clarity every moment of the new life they built together. The couple became volunteers in support groups for families who had gone through similar traumas. Their story offered hope to those who had lost loved ones and to amnesia patients struggling to rebuild their identities. At one of these meetings, they met a young man who had lost his memory in a motorcycle accident. Sarah spent hours talking with him, explaining how it was possible to rebuild a life even without memories. "The most important thing," she told him, "is not to force the memories to return. Let your new identity form naturally, but keep your heart open to connections that feel familiar. Sometimes love finds a way to show itself, even when our minds don't understand." The young man followed her advice, and months later, he reunited with his own family in a way similar to Sarah's. The story spread beyond medical circles. A local producer made a documentary about the case, which won an award at a medical film festival. Sarah and Michael used the visibility to raise funds for amnesia and trauma research. Emily, now 6, occasionally asked if her mother might fall asleep again and forget the family. Sarah always reassured her, explaining that her brain was now strong and healthy and that she would never forget her loved ones again. "But even if my mind forgot," Sarah would say, placing Emily's hand on her chest, "my heart would always remember you." Nathan, at 2 years old, knew no reality other than having his whole family together. For him, it was natural that his mother worked at the same hospital where his father was the director. It was natural that the patients knew their story. It was natural that his family was special. On quiet nights, when the children were asleep, Michael and Sarah would sit in the rose garden and talk about the time they had been apart without knowing. "Do you think that on some level I knew you were my husband?" Sarah would ask. "I'm sure of it, just like I felt something special for you from the very first day, even though I thought I was being unfaithful to Jennifer's memory," Michael would reply. "It's strange to think that all those months I was taking care of our daughter without knowing she was really ours. But you cared for her with a mother's love. That never changed. And our connection. Did you feel like you knew me? From the very first day, there was a familiarity I couldn't explain. It was like my body recognized yours, even when my mind said it was impossible." These conversations helped them process the emotional complexity of everything they had been through. The trauma of separation, the confusion of reunion, the joy of discovery, the fear of revelation. Each emotion had been intense and real. The hospital where it all happened became a reference center for amnesia cases. Doctors from all over the country came to study the protocol developed from Sarah's experience. The case was documented in medical textbooks and helped improve similar treatments. Dr. Robert Wilson published several articles on emotional recognition independent of conscious memory. His work gained international recognition and opened new lines of research into the neurology of love and family bonds. Michael himself changed his medical approach after the experience. He began to value the emotional and psychological aspects of treatment more, understanding that healing goes beyond treating physical symptoms. Sarah specialized in post-trauma care and became one of the most sought-after nurses at the hospital. Her personal experience made her uniquely capable of understanding and supporting patients going through similar situations. The family created an annual tradition. On the day of their reunion, they held a special celebration where each of them shared their version of what they had felt during that time. It was a way to keep alive the gratitude for the miracle they had lived. Lily always told how she knew Sarah was her real mother from the very first moment. Nathan, when he was older, said he had chosen to be born just as the family was reuniting. Lily's grandparents, Jennifer's parents, who had suffered tremendously from losing their daughter, felt indescribable joy upon discovering she was alive. The reunion between Sarah and her parents was another deeply emotional moment in the family saga. "I knew something was different when she showed up at our door 3 months ago," Jennifer's mother said. "She looked at our house like she recognized it, but she said she was just paying a courtesy visit to the parents of a deceased colleague." During that visit, Sarah had felt strangely moved and comfortable in the house, but attributed it to empathy for the grieving parents. Lily's maternal grandmother, who had helped Michael care for the girl after the accident, cried with joy when she learned her daughter-in-law was alive. "I always felt Jennifer was still around," she said, Sometimes I'd wake up at night with the feeling she had been there, watching over Lily while I slept. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of reunion and overcoming. Do you believe true love can transcend even the loss of memory? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories.